This segment is about accreditation as a process. It's a companion segment to the one about accreditation as an outcome. NASPAA's accreditation as a process, and the process that you'll go through, is all about program improvement to better serve public service. How you do that, how you document it, how you use evidence to make decisions. What are the steps in that? So to explain that, we're going to compare NASPAA standards and the process to two other processes that you might be familiar with. One is how you write a grant proposal for funding. Another is how you conduct an operational audit. And we're going to talk about the accreditation itself as a process. In other words, how does NASPAA work? What are the various steps that the NASPAA and COPRA in particular go through in the accreditation process? We'll also talk about the accreditation triangle to leave you with an image that's a really valuable image as you think about the various parts of accreditation, and when you're finished, have you attended to all the legs of that triangle? Now, as with all of our videos, stop at any point, study a slide if you like. Download the videos. There'll be detailed notes accompanying what you download. You should certainly plan on sending someone to the Accreditation Institute at NASPAA's annual meeting so you can better understand how to apply the tools and concepts that we talk about in the videos. So, on to the process. Well, beginning this discussion, you have to think about the differences between inputs, outputs, and outcomes. COPRA definitely makes distinctions among these three. They can be confusing. This is a slide you might want to study. I mean, an input is basically a resource that you use to produce an output. It could be your faculty are an input, the buildings are an input, your library resources, they're inputs. So those are inputs. You need to know what those are, but those are being transformed into outputs. Things like student papers, student work projects, the classes that faculty members teach, you could say, is an output of faculty member work. The articles that faculty members produce and may publish, the policy analyses that they produce and may give to different decision-making groups in the community as part of community engagement and so on. Those are examples of outputs. But then there's outcomes, which is to say, well, why does all this matter? So you've combined a physical facility or online technology with a set of students and a faculty to produce student work products, but the outcome is, what have students learned? What can they do? What are their competencies? That's ultimately where you're creating value for your program. And the same thing even with faculty, something like faculty research. Faculty are spending their time to collect data and turn it into research or think about theories and write it up and publish it. But what's the outcome? The output is the published article. The outcome is, are people reading it? Are people using it? Is it affecting other people's research? Is it being cited? Are the policy reports that they produce being used to change policy? Are public administration decision makers basically using the results of this to improve the way they manage public affairs, to improve public policy? So what NASPAA is really looking at in an accreditation process is how you transform your inputs into outputs that achieve outcomes that are consistent with your mission. What is it that you're trying to do? So in broad scope, that distinction among inputs, outputs, and outcomes is important to the overall accreditation process. You're going to be dealing with it throughout the entire self-study process. So now let's think about, if you will, as an analogy, accreditation is writing a grant proposal. I mean, writing a grant proposal has a certain set of elements that anyone who's written a grant proposal knows that you have to talk about. Well, what does a funder want to know about your program to decide whether to give you money as opposed to someone else who's got a perfectly good reason for asking for their money? I mean, in effect, a funder wants to know, how are you going to do what you're going to do? Why do you want to do what you're going to do? Do you have the capacity to do what you're proposing to do? Are you going to spend the money effectively? How will you know whether you've succeeded? How are you going to evaluate your success? When you write a grant proposal, you're in effect sort of telling a story to persuade, given the mission of that grantor, that they should fund you to do something that you want to do. And this actually could be internal. It could be how you get funds from within your institution to fund your entire program. Now, maybe you write a grant proposal or submit a budget once a year. It may seem to be like a one-time thing. But in fact, when you write a grant proposal, any funder wants to know that there's going to be ongoing benefit from any resources they put into your program. So even they're concerned about how you respond to change and continuous improvement. Now, a number of programs teach about how to write grant proposals and probably cover this in far greater detail. Some programs also talk about how you do operational auditing. And this is associated with the United States Government Accountability Office, USGAO. The GAO Yellow Book outlines how it's done. These are audits of organizations and programs for efficiency and effectiveness. They ask remarkably similar kinds of questions. They go into, a group of auditors come in and they look at a program and they say, well, what is this program's mission? Does it fit its environment? And what kinds of people does it have to execute on these objectives of this program? And how has this program organized itself? Are these aligned? Is their organization and structure, their governance arrangements aligned with their mission and the people that they're using? And do the people that they're using have the right knowledge, skills, and aptitudes? And then what policies and procedures do they implement? Are they using appropriate policies and procedures to execute whatever this program is, a public service program, a social service program, criminal justice program, public health program, whatever? And then how is the program managing itself with the information it collects about its operations to continually improve and get better at what it's doing? And that's what an operational audit is, and the resulting report tells the management and the people to whom they report how well are they doing on their objectives and their mission. So that ultimately leads to the comparison to what accreditation is all about, because you can see in the completed slide that each of the standards in NASPAA's accreditation sort of corresponds to the kinds of things that happen in a grant proposal. A grantor wants to know your goals and objectives, so does an operational auditor, and so do the accreditors. What's your mission? What's your goals and strategies for achieving it? A grantor wants to know, do you have the capacity to use its money appropriately? The operational auditor wants to know, how are you organized? Do you have the people to do what you need to do? And that's the same thing that accreditors ask in standards, in subsequent standards 2, 3, and 4. Policies and procedures. Well, in the accreditation setting, the policies and procedures to execute your program that are analogous to what an operational auditor would be, well, tell us about your curriculum. How did you design your curriculum the way you did it? Why is it designed the way it is? How do you execute it? How do you know that it's working, which gets to the monitoring function? Why are you doing what you're doing with internships or whatever it is? How do you recruit your students? How do you place your students? You have policies and procedures for all those things, and that's what an operational auditor would look at, and that's what accreditors look at. And again, at the end of the day, just like a grantor and to some extent just like an operational auditor, which those are one-time things, accreditation looks like a one-time thing, but you report annually on your progress. NASPAA and COPRA are looking to see that you have processes in place to collect legitimate, valid, reliable data so you can continually improve. That's what the whole thing is about. So any one of these models might help inform and explain, if you will, the accreditation process. Now, the metaphor that I recommend, or visual I encourage you to think about, is what we call an accreditation triangle. The triangle is the really most powerful geometric unit because it can withstand the most weight without collapsing. And accreditation is about these three things, and we'll repeat it over and over again. It's about mission, process, and outcomes. If you don't have any one of those, then the whole thing collapses. What's the point of having a process, or one process rather than another, if you don't have a clear mission? How do you know if you're achieving your mission if you don't have identifiable outcomes and you're not measuring those outcomes appropriately? So this accreditation triangle, if there's one image that sticks in your mind, keep this triangle in your mind as you go through a self-study report and think about what's the mission, what's the process, what's the outcome? And of course, how are you documenting it? What's the evidence you're using? How did you devise the mission? How did you devise the processes? How did you decide what to measure and what not to measure? Now we can also look at the process that NASPAA actually uses for accreditation. And it's a flow chart, really, and it has a variety of steps. It really has, I may show you 16 steps, but there's more. This is just an overview. And it's a process that could be analyzed just like you're seeking accreditation is a process that you go through. I mean, someone has to set the standards. Typically, it's a group of people who review the field, propose a set of standards, NASPAA membership approve the standards. Then they have a body to implement it. That's the Commission on Peer Review and Accreditation. They implement it. You're a program that wants to be accredited, so you first ask, am I eligible? There's a process that goes through where you propose that you're eligible, a committee decides if you're eligible, COPRA decides, yes, you're eligible. If they're not, they tell you. If you are, you proceed. If you're not, you have to do some work to prepare to be eligible. If you proceed, then you go through the self-study process. The self-study process might actually take 2 or 3 years. If you're just starting out for initial accreditation, all depends on how well you've collected data and the data you have available and how long it takes you to collect the information to demonstrate that you're doing all these things. But in any case, you do the self-study. It's at least 12 months to conduct the self-study. You submit it. A committee of COPRA will review it, make recommendations to COPRA. Should we proceed, COPRA will send you an interim report. Here are our concerns. You get a chance to respond to the interim report. Then, if the decision is to proceed with a site visit, which may or may not be, then the site visitors come in, staff propose a membership of the site visit team. The site visit team you can look at and say, well, there may be a conflict here. You agree upon a site visit team and a schedule. The site visit team shows up. They're the eyes and ears of COPRA. They report on what they find. They send a report, a draft report to you. You can review it. You can suggest changes. The site visit team then decides which changes it will accept, sends the report to COPRA. COPRA then gets the report, and the report is the basis on its decision about accreditation. If the decision happens to be a negative one, there's an appeals process. If it's a positive one, you receive a 7-year accreditation, for example. And there are a few other interim steps with that. You also have to file annual reports every year thereafter that sort of monitor the issues that COPRA might have been concerned about and your overall performance. This whole process of accreditation is consistent with NASPAA's mission. NASPAA's mission is to improve public service by improving public service education. The accreditation process is a strategy, it's a tool, it's a set of policies and procedures for achieving that mission. And so this is all what accreditation is about. It's about improving public service education to improve public service. So there are resources available, including the GAO Yellow Book is online, and there are resources about how to write grant proposals you can look at. And if you have questions, don't hesitate to send them to us at this address, and we'll try to respond, perhaps with frequently asked questions or at the Accreditation Institute. This is all about really not just seeking accreditation. This is about improving public service.